Hi, this is Jeff White with Life and Living Now, and I want to talk a little bit today about neuroplasticity. We have often heard, and a lot of times we'll think, well, this is just the way that I am and I can't change, or that change is hard, um, and that, this is what we're accustomed to. And for years, we were kind of taught that the brain as it's settled was kind of hardwired and could not be changed. In the last 10, 20 years, this thinking has changed. And so now we have what's called neuroplasticity, where the brain is able to form new neural pathways. Sometimes that happens as a result of an injury, loss of use, and so the brain begins to rewire itself. I understand things from people who have suffered from strokes and been able to relearn, you know, how to speak, get their thought processes down, etc. So the brain establishes new neural pathways. And in the research in self-improvement and self-development, it counters that idea that this is just how we are. And if you really want to change, we often have taught, if you really want to change, you can change. And I look at things as yin and yang. So yin is the eastern side. It is introspective. It is meditation. It is working from the inside out. But we also have our physical bodies that have an impact, and they inform part of our processes and have an impact on our process, and that's more yang. So the yin and yang have more of an exterior, external, and then more of an internal. We have more Western, kind of task-oriented, but Western viewpoint, and then you have the Eastern. And when you combine those, they help to support each other. I still am a firm believer that you create change from the inside of yourself, that you are the thinker of the thoughts. And as we let go of the ego mind, you are spirit, you are awareness, consciousness at your deepest level. And because we're awareness and consciousness, then we're able to create. Humans have the ability to be able to create far more than, say, the bees or the ants in creating their homes, or birds. We actually can take the substances that are around us and create new things. We can build skyscrapers, we build roads, we build computers, we understand and have built the internet. So we have all these things that we build. And some of that comes from the Western side, some of that comes from the Eastern side. But creation, there's always two parts of creation. There's the internal and then there's the external. And when we're looking at change within the individual, then how I believe, it's where mindfulness comes in. How I look at mindfulness, how I practice mindfulness and being in the moment and watching my thoughts, I can begin to take control of my thoughts. I begin to put that space between stimulus and response, and I can see I don't need to be reactionary. I can respond to situations, and I can change situations by changing my beliefs and changing my thoughts about something. It changes our perspective. And that has often years ago when I was coming up in the self-development, that it was you couldn't hardwire the brain, and so that behavior at times is very difficult to change, and that's really just not true. Instead, we're looking at the brain as kind of a living sculpture, as I mentioned earlier. It's malleable, it's responsive, and it's ever evolving. So that's what neuroplasticity is. It's the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience, based on intention, based on consistent effort. So one experience can give you insight, and as you process that experience, it creates new neural pathways or adapts and rewrites over old ones. Intention has a lot to do with it. Where do we send our will and our mind and our intention? When with Qigong, with martial arts, we talk about having heart-mind coherence and putting your heart in your mind. And part of that is that intention that begins to rewire how we think and rewire how we feel about our experiences. And in that, it's also able to rewire that and help to support our feelings. So And lastly, in that trifecta that I mentioned, it was consistent effort. So, in order to rewire your brain, to rewire your behavior, your thought process, it does take consistency. And we've known this, but now we're going to apply this even more in looking at rewiring my brain. And so, you know, what is neuroplasticity? By definition, it refers to the brain's ability to reorganize neural pathways, form new connections throughout life. Now, there's different types. There's structural, which is changes in the physical structure of the brain via new synapses that are formed. And there's functional, which is rerouting tasks from damaged areas to more healthy ones. You also have trigger points. You're learning new skills. You're overcoming challenges. You're practicing deeply intentional habits. All activate neuroplasticity. And I would say pay attention to that phrase that you're practicing deeply intentional habits will help to form and activate this neuroplasticity. All right, so consistent, deeply intentional. So, how does neuroplasticity fuel goal achievement? Then, when consistency, as I mentioned, engraves those pathways. It's very similar, say, if you're walking across, walking through the woods and you see a path. You're going through a field and you see a path, and when you first go walk through, you're stepping on the grass and the grass bounces back. You keep walking that same path, and now the grass goes away, it bends, it goes back to the earth. The root systems that were there, they begin to get damaged, and you're creating pathways. And pretty soon you keep that up, and now you have very definitive pathways that your brain, in this case, can use to work and to communicate information. So that consistency creates pathways in your brain. When you practice breath retention or deep breathing, when you practice chakra alignment, you begin to work these thought processes into your mental map, into your neural map, and so it shifts to favor those patterns. So you can see this is not a one and done situation. This is, I've got to continue to use that consistency. I have to be consistent. I see pragmatic in my thinking. I simply look at this and it makes sense to me that I'm going to need to continuously renew my mind. And if I want to change my behavior and I want to change my thoughts about that behavior, I need to see what my thoughts are. And I need to be aware of those thoughts, and then I can begin to change them. Now, visualization also sparks change. So intentional imagery, like visualizing your desired goal, it activates similar brain regions as the actual experience. So planting seeds of transformation before the physical action takes place is vitally important. Athletes have done this for years, where they have visualized their performance. I did this both within my martial arts when I was learning new applications, new concepts. I would just envision those deeply, and I talk about that. To don't just learn with your head, learn with your heart. Visualizing when I was in business, I was a realtor for a long time, for decades. And before that, I was in sales. And I would imagine and I would visualize sales, I would visualize signed contracts, I would visualize listings coming in, and visualize buyers. And I could tell it always made a difference. And I may not have anything on the books, and people would start coming in. So visualization and visualizing the end result of what you want is very important. And that sparks change. It helps you create new neural pathways. Emotional engagement also amplifies impact. Goals tied to emotion, like the exhilaration of mastering of feeling, mastering of movement, anything within your skill set that you wish to increase your ability, and have it in taking that visualization but impacting it, infusing it with emotion is vitally important to create those neural pathways, and actually as many times is the missing link between just affirmation and actual realization. Affirmation is good. That's part of that consistency and it helps to rewire your thinking process. But we're also emotional, and that infusing your thoughts with emotion and your visualization with emotion is vitally important. And challenge breeds growth. So stretching your limits, causing you to have to think differently, think outside the box. All this forces the brain to adapt. So in certain discomfort levels lies neuroplastic gold. Um, you can do things like, and there are tools. Some people like reciting mantras. Very good. I tend to use affirmations. You can make them similar to mantras as well, but they're not just affirmations by rote. They're affirmations that I go deeply and I put myself into a relaxed, alert state, and I begin to visualize those affirmations and the feelings. I inject those feelings, and I want to be able to feel. And all of those are what I do to help, are the tools that I use to help create these neural networks. And part of it I look at, I'm not just creating neural networks, that informs on the physical basis. Um, our belief systems create, or they come out of that mental space and that emotional and spiritual space. Are are knowing what is my personal philosophy in life? What do I think? What do I believe? What do I believe about myself in this instance? What do I believe about others? What do I believe about the ease at which this could happen or the difficulty at which this can happen? Then all those thoughts all come from inside, and I need to see that yes, I can do this. I need to change my feelings from I don't know if I can do this, or I can't do this, or this can't be done, to yes, I can. And we begin to change how we think about ourselves and how we believe about our situation and our world and ourselves. And that informs also our physical being and helps to create those neural pathways. When we engage in certain activities, dopamine is released and the body gets accustomed to that dopamine release. Sometimes this happens, is why drug addictions can be so strong, but also why we get attached to certain activities and behaviors that we've ingrained in ourselves, because in part we've gotten accustomed to the neurotransmitters that the body excretes in response to the thoughts that we think. And so one informs the other and helps support the other. And we keep getting this dopamine rush, and the body wants that. The mind begins to want that. Crave may or may not be too strong a word, but it gets accustomed and it wants that. So it repeats the behavior in order to have that feeling that it's accustomed to with dopamine release. And sometimes it's just trying to get this homeostasis of just this is what I'm accustomed to. We're always under, if we live in a state of stress, then that's what the body gets accustomed to. And so it's what it's used to, so it wants to continue on. The body likes efficiency, the mind likes efficiency. And so once it gets accustomed to a certain state, it wants to continue that state. We need to change that state, because if we stay in a constant level of stress, we already know that it's not healthy for us. So we need to find something to change that, what creates that dopamine fix. And that's where walking and exercises and reading and eating proper food and and proper affirmations done properly. All these begin to change that the release of dopamine, the release of the neurotransmitters. That in itself will not change your behavior, but it helps to inform and make it easier. So that's why what I'm suggesting with all of this, and I encourage you to explore, is how all of these different modalities support and inform who you are and your experience of yourself. Because who you are in your original face is spirit. What we're dealing with now is more the ego, mind, and emotions. And so, how do we use our mind? We haven't been taught. We're learning how to use our minds. We are highly creative. We are the most creative beings that we know of in our existence at this time. And through our spirit and consciousness, we create. And now we have to learn, how do we use our minds to become more efficient, more effective, and create more, and refine that. So um, there's different tools you can use. It's important, daily practice, small focus sessions, even 10 to 15 minutes, lead to cumulative rewiring. You can pair breath and imagery, as we talked about, combine physiological training with this archetype visualization if you want to deepen neural integration. You can track shifts. Journaling is a great way to monitor how you identify, and how your identity and habits begin to blend. And don't forget rest and recovery. Sleep consolidates these synaptic changes. A lot of resetting, rebooting happens during your sleep. So get good quality sleep. Make your nocturnal habits your ally in transformation. So just a few ideas. So as you can see, as you begin to visualize, as you begin to want changes, you need to just rest assured your brain is creating new neural pathways. And this may take a while. Sometimes those neural pathways really seem to hit. Other times it takes a while, depending upon how ingrained your past habits and beliefs about yourself, biases about yourself, and your situation in the world, how ingrained they are, will also inform how your neural pathways have to be reset. But try it. And I always say, I believe I'm a healthy cynic. I don't always take everybody's word for it. There are things that I trust and I respect, but try it out. And I've always had this habit in my life of trying things out for at least a 90-day period in order to give time to alter my thinking and to give it a chance. And I have to have a certain willing suspension of disbelief and to see if something works. And if I see that I'm getting results, then I want to see, why is this working, and to what extent. And that's what I build on. So for me, this whole journey, with self-improvement, self-development, realization, meditation, that led me into Qigong and martial arts, started, well, I've always been this way, actually, but really became in depth probably in my understanding, my late 20s and 30s, and have built on from there. So I encourage you to explore, to try it out for yourself and see what you think. Feel free to write me, LifeandLivingNow at Gmail. And you can also answer with, respond onto this video. I'm happy to answer any questions, hopefully provide insight, make new videos, etc. But our message for today is understand that your self-improvement process is supported physically with Western science as well as Eastern inspiration as well, and combine those two to support your own self-improvement, and realizing that you're already whole. But how do we use our mind and our emotions? How do we use that to our benefit and to the benefit of the world? So thank you. Have a great day.